having said that, it is certainly an angry show. It is about the idea that we are worth less, and that is an unreasonable thing to contemplate for all of us. It's unacceptable. And none of us want to be part of a world that is going to do that to human beings. And if we don't exert on behalf of human dignity at the expense of maybe, profit and capitalism and greed are inevitabilities. But if we can't modulate them in some way that is the framework for an intelligent society, we are doomed. And it's going to happen sooner than we think. And I don't know what form it will take, and I'm not smart enough to stand here and describe the exact America that I'm talking about or when we're going to get there, but I know that every year it's going to be a more brutish and cynical and divided place. And being a parent and being a Baltimorean and having spent half my time in one part of the city trying to describe what's going on to the other part of the city, I have to say I find that incredibly debilitating and frustrating. And I'm open to suggestion. I'm open to any suggestion about how to make it better. In North Philadelphia, or East St. Louis, or the South Side of Chicago, or most of Detroit, or Liberty City, Miami. I believe these things are endemic. I believe everywhere we've constructed an alternative America for the haves and have-nots. And I don't think Baltimore is unique in that sense, and I don't think I'm writing a story unique to Baltimore. If I was, I'd only have viewers in Baltimore. It wouldn't resonate with anyone else. If you're saying if I grew up in a place that didn't, where these, where the manifestation of the two Americas was not on display, yeah, I probably would not have any familiarity with it, and whatever I wrote about would probably not be what I write about. Absolutely. By the way, I would say in a very cynical way, that's why so much of what comes out of Hollywood is horseshit. Because these people live in West LA, they don't even go to East LA. The only time they go downtown is to get their license renewed. And what they increasingly know about the world is what they see in other TV shows about cops and crime or poverty. I mean, the American entertainment industry gets poverty so relentlessly wrong. How is it that they do it? How can they get that? How can, poor people are either the salt of the earth, and they're there to exalt us with their homespun wisdom and their sheer grit and determination to rise up, or they are the people to be beaten up in an interrogation room by Sipowicz. It's one of the two. How is it that there's no middle ground for the American entertainment industry? How can there's nobody who's actually on a human scale from the other America? The reason is they've never met anybody from the other America. I mean, they can ask their gardener what it's like, but I'm being flippant, but that really is the problem. I'm from here, it's all I know, but you know what? I have seen enough of the rest of America to know the same things are going on in other cities. They're not going on in the places of affluence, but that's a whole other story, and that is part of the argument I'm trying to make. As far as the drug war, my opinions on the drug war are well known. I think the drug war has not only become a brutal war on our underclass, and no longer bears any resemblance to what once might have been a legitimate war on dangerous narcotics, but I believe it's actually destroyed the connections in society. It's made the two Americas more distant from each other. It's created the idea of supervillains rather than villains on a human scale. And it has alienated the police department from our policing structure from people who they need to do an effective job at what they are really good at, or what they ought to be really good at, which is solving crimes against people. Crimes of violence, crimes of property that are directed against people. And when the summit of police work is grabbing a guy with 2 vials on a corner and making him a stat at the Baltimore City Detention Center, and that gets you paid, and that gets you court time and overtime, and at the end of the month, your stats look like you made 40 arrests, all for CBS, all of a marginal caliber, and this guy over here he spent his time actually solving a rape or a robbery on his post. He figured out who's breaking into churches on his post, and he's got 1 arrest. and this guy's got 40, and this guy makes sergeant, and this guy gets court pay, and this guy's in court every other day, and he's carrying home a ton more money than this guy. But this guy was the cop. And in that way, the drug war has destroyed policing. And if you don't think it's destroyed the deterrent here in Baltimore, you don't know anything about what's happening in the police department. Because the police department here was a much more viable entity before it committed to the drug war on the scale it ultimately had to commit to, because that's the law of the land, that's the problem. They did what they were told. But it's been a tragedy. And so, as far as what we're trying to say about the drug war, the logical lesson is in there. Whether or not people want to take that away or argue about, whether Stringer Bell should have been killed, I can't. The star of The Wire is Baltimore. It's not the individual. There's no lead other than the city. It really is the story of the city. By the time, it doesn't feel like that at the beginning, but that was always our intent. And the only other thing we've stolen from, that I will credit, because they can't sue anymore, is we've ripped off the Greeks. Sophocles, Aeschylus, Euripides. Not funny boy, not Aristophanes, but the other three. And we've basically taken the idea of Greek tragedy and applied it to the modern city-state. And that's that's also disconcerting for Americans, because most of our drama, we lean heavily towards more the Shakespearean tradition, which is, man struggling against himself, man struggling against, another man. Nobody's necessarily fated. The Sopranos is Hamlet, or Macbeth, and done very well, by the way. I'm not critiquing it at all. But what we were trying to do with The Wire was to take the notion of the Greek tragedy of fated and doomed people, and instead of these Olympian gods hurling, indifferent and venal and selfish and hurling lightning bolts and hitting people in the ass for no reason, instead of those guys whipping it on Oedipus or Achilles, it's the postmodern institutions. Those are the gods. Those are our new gods. Those are the different gods of our lives. And this bothers the hell out of a Western, certainly Americans, I think, particularly. We do not like to believe we are fated. We don't like to believe that we are anything but always looking up. And it's sort of, that's part of the American psyche that but hey, I live in an America that can't solve its problems anymore. I don't know about you. So, I guess what I'm saying, I think I absolutely agree with you. You have to fight on every level for human dignity. You have to insist upon trying to address yourself to every symptom of the problem. But the problem, I would argue, is rooted in the fundamental economic model that says, you know what, we used to need all these people to run our factories, and to build stuff, and to ship stuff overseas, and now, for a variety of reasons, we need less of them. And we need them better trained, and the people who get left behind, we really don't know what their job is, or what their place as Americans is. Whether they're detoxed, whether they have a bed to detox or not. And, I've seen people go through that heroic thing of going to detox and coming out, and, white knuckling it through their neighborhood. And ultimately the question is, what are you going to do next? And that's, so I didn't mean to cut you off, but I would say, when I'm speaking in the negative about, I'm looking at that one big question,